everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Leandra the TBR0 and my goal is to lessen my physical TBR one book at a time. It is a very cozy Sunday. I have my blanket on, I've got a nice jumper. I am ready to have a relaxed sit-down video as we flip through my 2024 bullet journal. At the moment, I only have my yearly spread set up as well as a bit of a sneak peek into how I'm going to design my monthly spreads because I do have my January one set up already. However, I haven't written any reviews. I have finished 2 books as of recording, but I just haven't taken the time to review anything. And I also want to take the time to think about if I do want to do an entire spread for each book, because last year I made sure not to force myself into that and it was lovely, and I plan on doing that again. So it's more of a situation of wondering, hey, I read these 2 books. Do I have enough thoughts, feelings to actually dedicate a full spread? And that's a tip that I have for you today for those of you who are thinking about starting a bullet journal, but you're a bit intimidated by the idea of writing a review for every single book. Don't do that. No, that does not sound fun, especially if you have no interest in the read. Maybe it was a book that you hated and you don't feel like talking about it, or it was a book that was a 3-star and you're just like, I have no thoughts. It was a book I read and that's all I have to say about it. That's usually where I am. I'll either give reviews for my 4- and 5-star reads or my 2- and 1-stars, and then the 3 stars just kind of remain in the abyss of reading life. So without further ado, let's get into my 2024 reading spreads. If at any point in this video you realize that you're enjoying yourself, you're having a bit of fun, maybe you don't find my voice grating, you actually enjoy it and you want to hear it again in a different video, well, this is your reminder to consider subscribing to the channel, like this video, and maybe comment at the end any thoughts or reactions you had. Maybe you also do your own bullet journal and you want to compare spreads, saying, hey, I did this statistic, why haven't you included that? Or maybe that was a really good idea, I didn't do that, I'll have to include it in the next one. I would love to hear your thoughts and have a conversation there. And honestly, if you'd rather just stay silent, hang out, relax, and absorb the video passively, I very much welcome that too, because yeah, you're here and I actually am more grateful for that compared to anything else. So yeah, thanks for watching and I hope you enjoy the video. Now let's see which spreads made it into my 2024 bullet journal. So for the first section, I'm going to be following along, watching the video with you, and then I'll be switching over to just talk about spread by spread materials and what I was thinking as I was making them. But I do want to preface this by saying that anything you see on screen, especially as far as these products go, you certainly don't have to spend as much money as I have, even though I really haven't spent that much money in my opinion. As someone who is now into her 3rd bullet journal knows that she loves it so much. And so yeah, if you're just about to start, don't feel as though you need to spend as much money as I did. In 2022, that was my first year for bullet journaling. All I did was spend money on the bullet journal, on the black Papermate markers that are tried and true that I still use, and then I had a 10 count set of colorful markers. That's all I had. Didn't even have a ruler. It was last year when I splurged, got the ruler, and then expanded to the 25 count mild liner set that I have now. And so genuinely don't feel like you have to spend any money or that much. So I'm showcasing my Papermate black markers. I use that for outlining because it's a really nice fine tip, but I also use it for writing out all of my reviews because I do handwrite them all. And then I have my 25 count mild liner set of markers. Honestly, haven't spent any more money than I did the first time because they all are still in working order. There's 2 sides to them. One is a finer tip. The other one is fatter for coloring things in. As we get into the bullet journal spreads, you'll be able to see when I use the thicker side and when I use the thinner side. That was probably about $25 from Target, give or take maybe a couple dollars. I can't really remember at this point. And then I have my 45-cent ruler that has seen me through a lot of lines, I'll tell you that much. Now with my bullet journal, I did switch this up in the fact that I changed brands. So the first 2 years I used Minimalist Art, about $10-15 per bullet journal, and it worked perfectly fine. I just decided that I wanted to switch things up and I wanted a different color, like a different option. And so I have Scribbles That Matter, STM, as my new brand use. And this one was a bit more expensive, probably about $25, I'm not gonna lie. But I do love it so much. And I have stayed with the same size. So I'm using A4 size, that's quite big for some people. So don't feel as though you need to use that size. So there are some that are much smaller. I'm pretty sure that there are some that are larger too, but this was perfect for me. It's about the size of a regular piece of paper because I didn't want to feel restricted as far as my drawings go and as far as my writing reviews. Like, I didn't want to feel as though I couldn't talk at length about a book because there wasn't enough space for it, or keeping in mind enough statistics that I wanted to track. And so for me, A4 has been the perfect size, but don't feel as though you need to get something this big, because I know a lot of people have much smaller ones. Now, let's get into the spreads. So with my 2024 title page, I am sticking to a theme this year. Last year I was very colorful and had a huge amount of fun making it, honestly, a burst of rainbows everywhere. This time I'm keeping it a bit more simplistic, dare I say sophisticated, with a color theme. And that color theme includes like purples, yellows, a bit of grays and blacks to support that color scheme. And I am still keeping with the theme of carrying the last year with me. Last year, my title page included a bunch of books that I loved from 2022. I wanted to bring those with me to kind of like inspire me to have another great year of reading. This time, it's a bit more subtle. You can see that there is a yellow border around my title page, and at the very top left corner, it says from 2023. That's because my bullet journal last year was this golden yellow color. And then the internal border is purple. And you see in the top right corner, it says to 2024, because my 2024 journal is purple, but it also has the gold kind of bands, and it was too perfect for me not to do that. And so because I already did that, I just allowed myself to color in very fun books that are of any title that I may have in my mind. Next, I have my 2024 reading goals spread. Last year, I did a different spread that went 2 pages, and it was titled 23 Reading Challenges in 2023. So that ranged from qualitative to quantitative challenges, some that were harder than others, just a range of things I wanted to try. And as fun as that was for me, it felt like it became a bit of a chore for me to check through to see if I actually completed any of those challenges or if a book fulfilled any of the prompts that were there. And so I'm keeping things simple, and I only have my 5 major goals, and I actually did an entire video dedicated to that. So if you want to hear me explain a bit further why I set these goals, what I mean by these goals, then definitely go check that out. You can see that some of the ones that are very clearly quantitative, there is a box where I can check it once I actually fulfill that goal. And so that's quite simple, whereas other ones are just me supporting myself, supporting my goals to continue doing this. For instance, posting every Sunday, Thursday, continuing series I start previously. That's really just me keeping track of myself and hoping that I get it done. If I don't, it's not the end of the world. Then I have 2 spreads that 100% I adored last year, and so I'm keeping them this year. One is 24 physical TBRs in 2024. You see a lot of videos on BookTube, as well as a lot of reading journal spreads, where people will list off all of the books that they actually have the goals for. So they're very restrictive. They're saying these are the 24 books that I'm going to be reading, or I'm hoping to read by the end of the year. For me, that didn't work out very well in 2022. I did list out 22 books, and then I only read a couple of them, and it felt like, a chore for me to try to get to them. And so last year, I just only restricted myself by genre. I think I said something like, 3 thrillers, 5 mysteries that are classics, and spread it out that way. And while I still didn't get to the 23, there was only a handful of spots that I missed because I allowed myself to kind of spread out a bit. And really the main thing I want to focus on is reading from my physical TBR. It doesn't really matter what books I read from them. So that's why I really just enjoy adding the additional challenge of adding a genre. So for instance, 5 classic mysteries, 5 modern mysteries, 5 any fiction. So if it's fiction, doesn't matter what kind, I can just throw it in there. And then 5 nonfiction, which is very exciting, because I think last year I might have only said 3 nonfiction, and then we have 4 middle grade. And then the additional thing I added this year is actually just keeping track of the month that I read them in. I didn't do that last year. I just kind of wrote down the title when I fulfilled it. But I am interested to see if there are some years where I really get these done, and there are years where I don't. Or months where I don't. I can't speak today. And next we have my DNF list, my did not finish, and I did bring this over from last year. I had so much fun doing it, and I kept it really simple. I listed the month, and then I listed the titles that I DNF'd in that month, and I think halfway through, I realized that I was interested to know where I got those books. So was I predominantly DNFing library books? Was I predominantly DNFing books from my physical TBR? Purchased reads? That would be scary. And so I'm going to continue doing that. That's why in the top right corner, you're going to see a key. I just haven't decided how I'm going to do that. But there is already a book that I DNF'd this year. I will make sure to include a picture if I do that, so you can see what it looks like, because I did revamp it a bit. So you'll see I have the month, then the title, then DNF at. So where did I DNF it at? A percentage, a page number, and then format. So the first book I DNF'd this year was a physical book, and it was from my physical TBR, which is sad, but yeah, that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. Then I have my pre-orders. And so at the moment, these are all the books that I have pre-ordered for 2024. And I ended up deciding to include not only title and author, but then I have a section where I talk about the reason. Why did I pre-order this book? Because there should be a reason. The pub date, so the anticipation of like when they should be arriving in the mail. And then did I read it? Because I want to read all of the pre-orders, because like I said, one of my goals is to read every single book that I read in 2024. In 2024. You could have seen that in my reading goals list if you kind of paused the video and took a look at that. So what I really enjoy is that in the reasons, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books that are all third in a series. I find that very funny and very satisfying. And then I have a book from Agatha Christie, who I absolutely adore reading. And then I have 2 nonfiction books, mainly because I know the people. Caroline Crampton is my boss for one of my jobs, and then Subhadra Das, she was a guest on the podcast, and I really adored listening to her talk, and I can't wait to read her book, and so I decided to support them. So I feel like those are all really good reasons to be like supporting these authors, and I can't wait to read their books. So I'm definitely going to include that. And then I have, as you can see, more space on the table, because there might be a time when I pre-order other books later in the year, and so I didn't want to restrict myself to those being the only pre-orders that I might have throughout 2024. And then I have my books purchased. So I gave myself some space because last year I ended up having to include like a second spread midway through the year because I didn't have enough space. So we're gonna see if this was a good idea or a bad idea, if I'm enabling myself to buy more books. But for now, all I have included are the books I bought in December. So that's not gonna be a part of the challenge of me trying to read all the books I read this year that I bought this year. But I did want to kind of keep track and say like, am I still kind of chipping away at those? And then the only additional, I suppose, marker that I'm going to include is if I've read the book prior to purchase, because technically like pre-orders, I'm already keeping track of those on another page, and I kind of want to keep track of how many books I'm buying that I've read, because I've really been enjoying doing that, like reading a book from a library, supporting your library, and then going out and supporting the author again by buying their book. And then I have 2 spreads that I cannot remember, but I'm pretty sure I didn't have a Netgalley spread ever. So this is very new for me, but I think it's gonna hopefully encourage me to do more with Netgalley, because I always request books and I always read them and I always forget to review, and it's an ongoing cycle. And you won't see this until I put up a picture, but I have revamped it a bit. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I first was recording, and so I've included title and author, the pub date, and then have I submitted the review. So I have read a book already from Netgalley, but I haven't submitted the review yet, so I gotta keep on myself. And then I also did the same kind of revamping for gifted copies. The one thing I'm having an issue with, and if anyone in the comments wants to let me know their thoughts, I'm not sure if I want to list out all of the gifted copies, physical copies that I had from 2023 as well, or if I want to start afresh and only get the books written down that I'm given in 2024, mainly because I have a handful of books that I was gifted that don't come out until 2024, so technically I received them in 2023, but like they're for 2024 and I'm overthinking it, it's fine. So what I do have though is title and author. REC for me is going to mean received, so when did I receive it, and then the pub date. Now we have did I read it, and then did I review it? That was like a little bit of an addition at the end. And probably always my favorite spread is my books read in insert year here, 2024. So I've learned a big lesson last year. I had made a single spread, so one side, that I think with the chair design gave me 110 squares. And in 2023, that was not enough. I ended up reading 126 books. This was quite a bit. And so I've learned my lesson. And so now between these 2 pages, I have 150 squares. I also have a good amount of space at the bottom of the page in case I need to add more boxes. So smart Leandra. And as I always do, I've included a very pretty chair that I'm very proud of. And so with this one though, I got a lot of inspiration from the chair behind me. You might notice the pink blanket. I've got the lines of different colors. This is a much more muted chair than what I have working on my bullet journal. And then I have my cart here as well. And so yeah, I'm really proud of it. I feel like I challenge myself every single year to do a more complicated armchair, and this one turned out really well, I think. I'm very proud of it. Next, I have 2 spreads that I kept from last year, but I 100% revamped them because I just didn't like the way I used them last year. So with publication year bar graph, I'm going to try and explain this. The bar at the very bottom, I will be writing vertically the years every time I read a book and I have a year to include. This way, it allows me to keep track of every book I read in a different year, but also I'm not wasting space with years in which I don't read any books. I realized last year that I ended up just doing a list of years, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna see where they all come up, and then there were like certain huge gaps where of course I didn't read any books in that time frame, and it really annoyed me to see that. And so I'm hoping that this will make it look a bit more filled and just use my space more wisely. And then I have my genres page. That was another one where I felt it was just really chaotic. It was really hard for me to understand what I was doing when. And so at the moment, I've only listed out the genres I can really think of that I know I'll definitely be reading in 2024. If there are more, traffic, am I right? If there are more, I'll make sure to add them as I go. And the one thing I've added this year include subgenres and blends. So for instance, this past week, one of the books I finished is a historical mystery. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark it as a mystery, but then under subgenres and blends, I think I'm going to write a section for historical fiction and then include that just so I can be aware, because there's a lot of mysteries that aren't historical fictions that I enjoy, like cozies, hard-boiled noir, golden age. I could go off with mysteries, but like across that, on top of the fact that my favorite book last year, among many, includes a fantasy mystery. And so I would argue that it's a mystery, but it's also a fantasy. And I want to make sure that I'm kind of representing everything. So hopefully we're going to see how it goes. That's the fun thing about bullet journals, is that see if it works. And if it doesn't, don't include it next year and try a different kind of avenue for it. Then I have 2 spreads that are doing a lot for me. I'm really trying to utilize the space. We have read books that are acquired. Just like I did last year, I'm keeping track of how many books I read from each section of how I get them. So how many books were purchased, how many of the books I read were from my TBR backlist, were ARCs or gifted copies, or were from the library. Last year I had ARCs, I had e-ARCs and physical ARCs and physical copies, like promotional reads separate, but I'm just combining them this year because I guess I don't care. I'm less like focused on that now. And then I have reading formats. I've revamped this as well. It's a learning curve, I'm telling you. I have physical, audio, and ebook, but I realized that I do a lot of immersive reads, and I want to kind of count those separately so I know how many immersive reads I'm doing. And so I also have physical and audio, and then I have ebook and audio, just to see how that is. I imagine that it'll be a lot of physical and audio because I really don't e-read very often, but who knows? 2024, new Leandra. Maybe I'm getting more techie in my ways. So then I have my new to me authors page. This was so fun last year. I realized in 2022 that most of the books I read were by people I'd never read before. And so I was like, let's keep track of that in 2023. Turns out 72 out of the 126 books I read were all new to me authors. And then actually a good amount of the ones after that were those authors again. So for instance, like Ruby Dixon, I read more than a dozen of her books, or almost a dozen of her books. Then I also, with like Laura Olympus, found myself reading Rachel Smythe like all 5 volumes. And so same thing with Spy Family. I ended up reading up to volume 6. So I guess I can say I'm proud of myself for continuing a few people that I just started last year, but that is something I think I need to work on, is returning to authors that I've read one book by that I really enjoyed. I'm like, well, Leandra, keep going. Like, obviously you liked them the first time. Why aren't you trying them again? Then I have my series tracker. So I have broken this up this year, and I think I'm learning. With every series tracker spread I make, I realize what I'm actually interested in. And so I have one section that says series continued. So I'm going to keep track of that. And I'm probably going to do the same thing I did last year, where I include the boxes and fill out each box a different color from past years. So for instance, last year I had a box for, we'll say like the Bone Spindle series. I read the first book in 2022, so that was a different color box. And then I had the box I read last year for 2023, that was like a pink box. And so I'll include those with different colors. But then this year, because my pre-order, one of those is that I'll have another, so I know like what years I read them in. I just find that really fun. And then a series started, I want to keep track of how many series I start in 2024. I think I ended up inheriting that interest from Danny over at Danny Dabbles, because she had the goal of finishing as many book series as she starts last year, and that's not my goal, but I want to keep track of it. Then I have my monthly stats page. I always have to include like a nice hot warm mug beverage of, for me it's coffee, but for anyone else it could be something else. And I really like how this one turned out. It kind of looks as though I don't know, from like a kiln, like someone really made it handmade. I don't know, for whatever reason I find it a very cozy mug that's very simplistic. And I'm keeping this spread pretty much the same, but I have revamped it a little bit. So I still have my title that has like the number of books I read per month, whether it's middle grade, YA, or adult. And then I have my star ratings 1 through 5, but I also included a DNF because I want to see, just have that number out there. Like I have my DNF section, but I also just want a straight number so I know like how many DNFs I have. And then also my average star rating. You'll see that I made a mistake. My average star rating comes before DNF, when in reality I'd probably want it after my 5-star rating, just like having it all come up, kind of culminating in an average rating. But when I was drawing everything out, I accidentally started my star ratings too far over to the right. And so it just goes to show you that it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. Just pause, take a second, and see how you can kind of change it up to something that's still livable and you're fine with. And then a couple other changes I did was I include a 6 months total check-in, and then I have a 12 months total at the bottom. Both of those things I didn't include last year. And then I also have my physical TBR. So January through December, I'm just gonna create a number so I know which months were my biggest months for my physical TBR and which months were ones where I didn't even look at my physical TBR, let alone give it a second glance. Then we have my head-to-head. I did this last year and it was really fun. I did the year before too, but for whatever reason, I kind of like this design of keeping it to one page. So for here, I'm basically going to select a victor for every single month. Now, these 12 books aren't going to be my favorite 12 books of the year, I'm sure, because there's going to be probably high competition between different months. Whereas if there's a slumpy month where I read a few books where I'm like, I didn't really like everything, or I did, but none of them were 5 stars, then, you know, those slower months might actually have a bit of a dark horse, a 4-star read make it in. But yeah, so like, I think it's just kind of fun to see like, hey, this was my best book of the month. Let's see how it stands out to my best books of every other month, and just see who the champ ends up being. I really do enjoy that. And I did include a few honorable mentions, some space for that once the time comes for it. Now we have my Bookemon spread. I am really proud of this, mainly because you don't understand how like much I had to count and keep track of where I was and make sure that I had enough spaces, because before I wrote anything down, like, you know, the various items or the prompts, I had to create all of the grids, and I was so nervous that I was gonna mess up, but it worked out really well. And so now I have every single just general regular item spread here. I do have some space on the next page to include like seasonal, themed Bookemon, monthly Bookemon. But for now, I was like, I just want to get the regular prompts out on here before I start playing around with anything else. And so at the moment I have a section for the Bookemon name. So once I get the Bookemon, I'll fill that out. Then I have the items I need for that Bookemon. And with every item, I provide the prompt. And then I have a section where I can say which book I read for that prompt. So far, I actually have filled out a couple sections. So for my Earthstone, the prompt was Tree on the Cover. And so I ended up reading The Christmas Guest, which happened to have that back in December. And then I had my catnip. I got the catnip with Get a Life Chloe Brown. So I marked off, and every time there's catnip, I wrote down Get a Life Chloe Brown. So I know I got that book, or I got that item for that book. And then I also have the first of 3 books read for the stake with Murder at Midnight. So I think I did a really good job of like keeping track of that, and that way too I don't have to like open my computer every time I want to see, because I do have a spreadsheet thanks to Bert from reading with Merb, her Discord. Bert is one of the like managers of it, and created an amazing spread on like Google Sheets, but I didn't want to have to do that. So like I have this too. And then we finally have the end of my yearly spreads. I did leave some space because I might have things I want to add. I didn't really want to start my January spreads right away, but I do have it as a very clean kind of design this time. I changed it up from last year. If you want to see any of those spreads, by the way, that I've mentioned, you can definitely check out my like flip through, whether it be my first 6 months or my last 6 months. Both of those I make sure to go over my yearly spreads so you can see how they turned out. Obviously the last 6 months one, you'll see how they completed, what they look like once they're all filled out, so it might be a bit more intriguing to you. But for here, I have January and nice bubble letters. I have a box that has like 0-1. I'll be doing that for every single spread, every single monthly spread I do. And then I have the calendar, and what I do is that with every day I read, I end up circling with a certain designated color that tells me which book I read on that day. So for instance, on the first day of the year, Monday, it shows 1, 2, 3, 4 rings, meaning that I started 4 books on the 4th, or on the 1st of the month, which is really chaotic. It's fine. And the one thing I did change this year was that last year I used to write down like under a list of books, like write in that marker the title name, but because even though my mild liners do have a thin side, they're still kind of thick, and so I didn't really like the way it turned out sometimes, and so I made it a little bit cleaner. And so at the bottom of this calendar, you'll see under books that I just do like a dot of color, and then I write in black the title so that I know it's a bit of more of a key, and I think it makes it look a bit more clean and polished. I've also made the calendar a bit bigger to allow for the many rings, because I realized that I typically juggle way too many books at a time. I just got into that habit, and so I needed more space for the rings, and so now I can typically, I think I have enough space to like circle like 5 books at a time, which probably should be my max per day anyway. So there we are. And I haven't done any monthly spreads yet, so hopefully maybe at the end of January I can look through that if people are interested in knowing what my month would look like at the end of a month. But beyond that, I'm really looking forward to this. I was really nervous. I'm always nervous at the beginning of every bullet journal to kind of like start afresh and like hope everything looks well, because you want to start off on the right track with everything in your life, including your bullet journal. Sorry, I got so excited I like jarred the screen, so I'm really looking forward to it. It turned out lovely. Even the few mistakes I made, honestly, it shows that I'm human. It shows that I took the time to be designing these by hand, and so I should appreciate that I'm doing that for myself. And so yeah, if you're a perfectionist, try to give yourself some grace as you're working through your bullet journals. Mistakes happen. That's okay. That's why whiteout's there, or why doodles happen. You can doodle over mistakes a lot of times. Those are my spreads. I hope you had a good time looking through them. I hope I didn't talk your ear off too much. I realized that this video is going to be longer than I planned. Are we surprised? But thank you all who made it to the end. I really do appreciate you. I hope to see you talking in the comments if you're comfortable. If not, consider liking the video, or just make the plan to catch up with me next time. All right, thanks everyone. I hope to see you again. Bye.